Hello and namaste. My name is Tim Halloran and I'm an astrologer here in Savannah, Georgia. I put out these videos once a week and I also offer transit reading and birth chart readings at the link below. Now, for those of us who have been paying attention, this last week and where we are today is a pretty potent period. So let's start off by saying that first of all, we had this last weekend being a little bit heavy with the moon in Capricorn. Previous to that, we had the full moon in Sagittarius, which was illuminating a lot of stuff that could have been previously undisclosed. With a trine between Chiron and Saturn, that's pretty much exact all this last week into this week into the next week, we're talking about getting deeper, practical, fundamental understanding of our own wounds, of our own conditioning, and we are having a tremendous opportunity now to make changes, to stop cycles that we've been trapped in for a long time. So let's talk about it. First of all, today we have the moon in Aquarius. Right now, she's forming a square to Saturn, which I hope will help me get down to serious business in this report. The sun is in Gemini for 5 more days, and on the 21st of June, he moves into Cancer. This is called the Summer Solstice, when the sun is at the highest point in the sky. It's a very important date every year. I think particularly this year, as we'll get to later, there's some interesting coincidences falling on around this summer solstice. But what we're talking about here is we're talking about one of the 4 cardinal points that we annually go through every year. There's 2 equinoxes and 2 solstices. And it's really important during this solstice time that we take into consideration the full grand cross. You have the summer solstice. This is when the sun is most ascended. Then we have the fall. Then we have the winter, that is the death. And then we have Easter, which is when the sun rises again. It's important to remember this because the solstice time is when the sun's at its highest. This is a time for rejoicing. This is a time for bringing in the new. This is a time for magic, and this is a time when it can be very visible to us, the magic of life in the northern hemisphere. It is full of life right now with the sun shining down on us. That being said, we have to look directly down. We have to see the sun during the winter solstice in December. We have to start preparing already for the next winter solstice, because after this Saturday, the days start decreasing. And we have to be prepared to again dive during the fall into the underworld and confront the darkness of winter. This is a tremendous opportunity for us to ready ourselves, to breathe in the new, to breathe in the positive sun energy and actualize the future. Make changes to these patterns. That way, in the winter time, we can be in a totally new pattern. We can be in a totally new system. We can have a totally new mental way of handling things. We can be strong enough to continue on the next step up on the spiral. We're always going around in cycles, yes, but we're actually spiraling. But it is up to us whether or not we take that step up to the next step. Yes, we can remain stuck on the same level, spinning around forever. Or we can decide, and we have the free will, to make the step up towards love. And that is going to be the focus of this report. As we talk about the summer solstice. So what is this summer solstice? What is this Cancer-Gemini cusp? Now, I am very partial towards the Gemini-Cancer cusp. I have a bias going on. It's my favorite time of year. It's the time of my appearance. But this cusp, being during the summer solstice in this age, is very relevant to us. This very much is the cusp of magic. This is a cusp where we can really make conscious evolution in terms of the entire mass consciousness of humanity. This is the opportunity for us to step up, and I will be discussing why that is. Now, it's interesting because tomorrow we have Mercury going retrograde, and he moves back into his natal sign of Gemini. And we also have the asteroid Juno moving into Gemini. Then on Thursday, we have the 4th quarter square moon. That's the half moon. And the Sun, Mercury, and Juno will all be conjunct, squaring that moon, which will be in Pisces on Thursday. Okay, so what we're dealing with is a lot of emotions, and we're dealing with potential confusion. But this really isn't confusion so much is there is just so much available to us right now. There are so many things that our minds can really wrap around with the sun illuminating everything with this past full moon in Sagittarius. There is so much happening in such a short amount of time. There is so much profound depth being unveiled to us. It can seem confusing. What are we trying to do with this emotional confusion? How can we move forward? How can we take that next step up on the ladder of love? And what it has to do with, I believe, is this transition period of the gender, the main fundamental sexual energy, which isn't even sexual. We're just talking about gender. We're talking about the fact that this universe is founded upon the duality of the masculine and the feminine. And we're coming out of this age that has been very male dominant. And there's so much confusion there, there's so much misunderstood, and now is a terrific opportunity for us to get a closer look at what has happened and how it has personally affected us. And how has it personally affected us is we are all wounded. We are all wounded by what has happened and how the energy has become disbalanced, how there is no longer harmony, there is discord, there is chaos, there is confusion, and that confusion keeps us limited, keeps us in cages, and feeling like we're in cages, feeling like we're useless, feeling like we're not actualizing our full potential and our full freedom. We are hurt, we are wounded, we are suppressed. And what's so very interesting is what has really been sort of confused the most, you could say. What has become most frustrated and got sort of lost is this masculine energy. And in its confusion, in its self-inflicting pain, it has suppressed the feminine. But what is happening now is we can get a greater understanding that this masculine nature that has sort of taken over the world and allowed for a lot of this confusion and the suppression of femininity and the taking over of nature and all these things that go together, it's not even masculine nature's fault. This is part of a greater dance. This is part of a greater movement that is in service to beauty and love. So we have to get really deep with everything, including our own masculine nature. And our own masculine nature over the last 6 months has been under a lot of revision. Starting in December, in January, I called this year the year of new beginnings. And I'm saying now the summer solstice, this began in the winter solstice. And what's very interesting is we have had Mars making an opposition to Uranus. First time it made this opposition was Christmas 2013. Then Mars started doing this retrograde. He passed over this Mars opposition a second time on Easter. And now he's going to make his third and final opposition to Uranus right after the summer solstice. So this coincidence I find is very interesting because we have the death, the resurrection, and the ascension all coinciding with these Mars-Uranus oppositions. And what I think these Mars-Uranus oppositions is exposing to us how our own masculine nature has become confused, has become isolated. And this is what has happened to the masculine energy. Masculine energy has not been taught. Men have not been taught how to actualize their own femininity. And love is simultaneous masculinity and femininity in relationship. So if we are suppressing either one or the other, there is no love. So men have been suppressing the feminine energy unconsciously for many thousands of years. But it's been hurting both sides. Both sides are hurt by this, and it's not masculinity's fault, really, that it became so perverted. It's been connected to so many things. It's been a spiral that has been happening for a long time. But basically what we can say is that men not knowing how to be soft, to be intimate, to be expressive of their feelings has allowed for masculinity to become condemned, to become damned and isolated because it is no longer in contact with his own mother. And this has been something that may have been coming up since Christmas. Christmas time, the winter solstice, is typically not an easy time of year. Particularly this year, we were first encountering this frustration. And what this frustration is that we want so many things and then we don't quite get them. We may be getting little bits of things that maybe look similar. We may have synthetic alternatives and doppelgangers and, ways of tricking our minds into believing that we're getting love. And this is what masculinity has done by creating video games, by creating computers and sports games. And everything is done online and there's so much separation between people is that we're trying to simulate relationships with one another, and we're not getting the depth that we so desperately want. Another thing is that masculinity has encaged itself in this way, and now we are realizing that we have put this cage on ourselves. And this is a very interesting point, is, there is so much understood now that basically a lot of this stuff has sort of been impressed on us by them. Them being the sort of, label that we assign the group or whatever that has the ulterior motives that have sort of conditioned us into believing that it has to be the old way and that we can't actually get the things that we so desire, which is love, which is intimacy in relationship, which is warmth, which is nurturing, which is the mother. So it's very interesting that Jupiter is square the moon's nodes this week, and Mercury will be in trine to the moon's nodes this week. This is what masculinity has to do. It has to rediscover its femininity. This means getting in touch with our feelings. This means expressing our feelings. And this is what the summer solstice is. This is what the Gemini Cancer cusp is. Gemini is relationships. It is consciousness. It is friends and neighbors. We start forming these connections to other people, and we want to become closer to them. So what happens is, as we move through these signs, as we acquire more and more Gemini, it accumulates into Cancer. What happens when you accumulate relationship and you start speaking to other people and you start relating to other people and you start having people live near you, and you start having people live around you and you start living your lives with them, is it leads directly to Cancer, which is empathy, which is nurturing, which is the family. And this is what we want in our relationships now. We want intimacy. We want to be able to talk about our subjective, personal lives. We want to be able to talk about deep things, including what hurt us now, what hurt us years ago, what hurt us when we were little children. And men do not know how to do this. I'm very seriously considering starting what might be a men's group here in Savannah, more so for the humor of it, as how interesting it would be to try and form a group of men saying that we would only meet and talk about our feelings and what is happening in our subjective lives. Because I think any man in this culture, if you were to ask them about that, they would tell you that that idea is hilarious, because there's no way you could even imagine grouping together with your friends, with your male friends, and only talking about your feelings and your subjective personal lives. That is why it is now the work of men to do exactly that. We have to repair this stuff ourselves. We can't just blame them for conditioning us the way we were conditioned. Who they are is simply the past, and we are the future. So it's not so much that we have to declare war and we have to fight everybody and we have to start, slaying demons. We do, but these demons are inside of us now, because they've already been conditioned onto us via them in the past. So now they are us, now they are internal, and now all we have to do is change ourselves. The truth is we have been wasting our own energy. We have not been as resourceful, we have not been as practical or productive or beneficial to ourselves and other people in the area of spiritual development. We haven't. We've been trying to get there, and we have been encountering recently all of these blockages, all of these wounds that have taught us that we can't do that because we're isolated, because we are alone. And so we start falling into these past patterns of, well, I can't do it, so I might as well go back into this crutch. Well, I might as well put that Band-Aid on. Well, I might as well cover it up with this drug or this television show or this sports game. So what this opportunity is with the summer solstice is this means you can step up. But if you are going to, you have to take that step. Nobody's going to do it for you. There's not going to be an event that transforms everything on the planet without your involvement. It requires our involvement. It requires us to understand, the only reason I go back to that crutch, I go back to that wound, the only reason I use that Band-Aid of drugs and alcohol is because I hurt really bad. And I have to go into this wound. I have to see the depth of this wound. I have to see what initially caused it. I have to see where it stems from in order to understand how to actually cure it. Because using some other method that does not actually acknowledge the root wound will never fix anything. So we do have to go back, and we do have to look really deeply. And this Saturn trine to Chiron is a very significant period of this. You know, Chiron was discovered in the early 70s, but in 1966 was when Chiron and Saturn were conjunct each other. And they will not be conjunct again in our lifetime. It's not going to be till 2111 that they're conjunct again. But now Saturn is forming a trine to Chiron. What was happening in 1966 was the rejection of the patriarchy, was the rejection of the authoritative, male-dominant father figure. You have to go to work, you have to go to school, you have to get a job, you have to work for the paper mill. It was the ending of that. It was the beginning of healing. It was the beginning of medicines and earth medicine and alternative healing being introduced, and all this happened simultaneously. With this trine happening now between Saturn and Chiron, we are having another opportunity to ground this into our life, to make practical, to make three-dimensional, to make real. What is the new way? What is the healing? Okay, and we are also given the opportunity to be serious in our own healing, to confront our own wounds and heal it and find the medicine for it. Whether it be a new diet, whether it be a new job, whether it be a new hourly schedule. Okay, the point is that we are making these changes now. We are being our own doctors now. We are taking that step up towards love. We are done with the bullshit. And that has been made apparent by being in the cycle of suffering again and again and again. How many times are we going to waste our energy and feel terrible because of it? How many times are we going to get drunk and lie in the corner of the room and remain antisocial? And we know that the alcohol is not a cure. It just is a blanket. And furthermore, it doesn't even make us feel any better. We just keep crawling towards it because we have acquired the conditioning that it helps. And now we are having to deal with the fact that we have been conditioned to believe something that is plainly not true. And now we have to go inside and change it ourselves. That being said, this is the liberation. This is the breakthrough. This is the beginning of the new way. This is the year of new beginnings. The summer solstice is the new beginning. Do it now. There is no more time to go back into old cycles. You will see now people making this choice. People will be choosing to go back into old cycles. And you don't have to be one of them. You don't have to choose to go back into the old paradigm of suffering and isolation and men not being able to communicate with men. And you know, this goes for women too. You know, men and women both have this masculine energy that has been deeply conditioned. That we have to be separate, that we have to do everything by ourselves, that intimacy and softness and opening to each other is a sign of weakness. And thus we keep ourselves imprisoned in isolation and defeat and meaninglessness because we forget everything when we forget love. Don't do it. Step forward. Now is the time to do it different. Now is the time to make a difference. Now is the time to forget about them. They don't apply to us anymore. They are the past. No, I'm not saying you should stop paying your taxes. If you stop paying your taxes, you are just involving them more into your life than you need to. So pay your taxes and pretend that you're not. Pay your taxes and ignore them. They don't live in our reality anymore. They have nothing to do with us anymore. We don't need the old system. We don't need the old school conditioning. We don't need the old parental conditioning. We don't need the 1950s capitalistic America mentality. We are beyond that. And we are living in a reality that is beyond that now. We are living it. We are being it. We are making the difference now. So in that respect, I am wishing you the very best, and I am hoping that you are all the more empowered to make a difference, because this is the opportunity for magic. This is the summer solstice. All right? So this is the 21st of June, 6:51 a.m. is the highest that sun will go. So go out there, soak it up, do your magic, do your prayers, do your intention, and we will make a difference. We will transform this world in this lifetime. I'm wishing you the very best for you and your beloveds. Namaste.